So perhaps it was one of the most consequential days of the president's second term. Tonight at this hour, an American finally free, reunited with his family.
I swear.
That right there, 21-year-old Edon Alexander released from Hamas captivity as the president heads to the Middle East for his first foreign trip. Hello, good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. Tonight, we're going to walk you through the significant diplomatic and economic developments from the White House today. The stock market ripping after the president announced the U.S. and China have both lowered tariffs.
We achieved a total reset with China after productive talks in Geneva. Both sides now agreed to reduce the tariffs imposed after April 2nd to 10% for 90 days as negotiators continue on the largest structural issues.
But it's not all smooth sailing, or in this case, flying. A third outage at Newark, bringing the transportation secretary to the microphones today.
We're going to have to do more than one location at a time, but yes, priority number one is going to be Newark.
Coming up here on The Hill, the former head of the FAA tells us what to expect next. Also tonight, will the Pope escape Uncle Sam? Why that's actually becoming a question, and what the new pontiff, as you see right there, told NewsNation today. But first tonight here on The Hill, perhaps one of the most consequential days of the president's second term so far. De-escalation with China, stock market soaring, Republicans revealing Trump's quote-unquote one big beautiful bill, and tonight, as the president heads abroad, pure joy after 583 days rather of pain.
Yo, yeah!
A mother there and her son, an American back home. NewsNation told tonight President Trump expected soon to meet with Edon Alexander. Our Julia Manchester live tonight at the White House. Julia?
Blake, it's an emotional day for Edon Alexander and his family, who are now reunited following his release from Hamas earlier today. Now, those images coming as President Trump travels to the Middle East for his first official foreign trip of his second term. Now, Alexander was the last living American hostage held by Hamas following the deadly October 7th attacks on Israel in 2023. President Trump reacted to the news earlier today from the White House. Let's take a listen.
They thought he was dead just a short while ago. His parents are so happy. They're so happy. So it's, as you know, Edon's the only American citizen who's captured and held hostage by Hamas since October 7th, 2023. And he's coming home to his parents, which is really great news. I mean, to me, it's big news.
In a Truth Social post on Sunday prior to Alexander's release, Trump said, quote, hopefully this is the first of those final steps necessary to end this brutal conflict. Now, Blake, NewsNation has confirmed that Trump will meet with Alexander in person during his trip to the Middle East this week. Blake?
And you can imagine what that scene will be like. Julia Manchester, live at the White House for us tonight. Julia, thank you. All right, back here in the U.S., stocks soaring today as both the U.S. and China lowered tariffs, potentially making strides at some point here in the future. We'll see how long it takes to a trade agreement. Now, the three major indices today, anywhere up from 2.8% to 4.3%. But I want to take a step back here for a second, as we have time and again here on The Hill. You've heard us say this week in and week out to try to put into context where things stand. Now 40 days since Liberation Day, when the president unveiled those worldwide tariffs. With today's big rally on the de-escalation news, the U.S. stock market now higher than it was back on April 2nd, up anywhere from just a fraction over about half a percentage point or so to look at that with the NASDAQ up over 6%. Now, the price of crude oil also down since Liberation Day, though some of that dropped due to economic worries. Even though there is still uncertainty, the U.S. labor market is resilient. Employers added 177,000 jobs last month. The unemployment rate didn't move. And the Fed chair, Jay Powell, said the economy is in, quote, solid shape. However, what really spooked the White House in the days following the first tariffs? Treasury yields, those are higher. And the reason why we keep talking about these Treasury yields and bonds and all that is because the White House is watching this. And if they're watching it, so are we. Joining us now tonight here on the Hill, the congressman from the state of New York, Mike Lawler. He's a Republican in one of the most competitive districts anywhere in the country. One of the reasons we wanted to speak with the congressman tonight. Thanks for being back with us here on the Hill.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So at the end of April, really a couple weeks ago, you basically said, look, if this trade war drags on, Congress needs to intervene. There's still 30% tariffs with China. So do you think we're in a good spot, or are you still a bit cautious, a bit leery?
No, look, I said from the very beginning, as a short-term negotiating tool, to force these other countries that have been fleecing Americans for years with bad trade practices and policies, this could be an effective tool in that negotiation.
Okay.
My point was that the president and the administration needed to start rolling out these trade agreements, which they are in the process of doing. And if that did not happen over that 90-day pause, then Congress would need to intervene. But my view is the president and the administration are making positive steps forward. We're seeing the UK, we're seeing China. I am sure in short order we will see Japan and India and Vietnam and Canada and Mexico and the EU make significant concessions, which is to the benefit of the American people and the American economy. So one of this is shaping up, and we are letting this process unfold.
Okay.
But as you just pointed out, in the 40 days since, the market is up. We've seen over $5 trillion of economic investment in the US.
I mean, look, markets are up. The administration's going to talk about investments. On the other side, I could also talk about, GDP, I guess. But look, there's a little bit of the lay of the land, right? We heard a lot of worry and chaos and all that. But to your point, I just sort of pointed out some of what happened in the last 40 days. Republicans.
Just on that point, though,
Sure.
You can't look at everything in the immediate moment that it's happening. You have to look at it in totality. And I think, obviously, the trade agreements coupled with tax and regulatory relief are critical.
So you walked me right into it, because Republicans are trying to marry the trade stuff with the tax cuts, right? And the House Ways and Means Committee today unveiled what the tax bill could look like. Make the 27 tax cuts permanent. No tax on tips or overtime through 2028. The SALT cap increased to $30,000. No tax increase for the top earners, really, for millionaires. The debt limit raised by $4 trillion. You are one of these New York Republicans. You are on the record, Congressman, saying no to the $30,000 SALT cap. Our Michael Schnell is reporting that you want that possibly raised double to $62,000 for individuals, $124,000 for families. Is that what you need? Is that your red line in order to go forward as a Republican with Trump's bill?
Well, I think this is important. I've been very clear from the very beginning. If there was not a fix for SALT in the bill, I would be a no. This proposal by the Ways and Means Committee and the Ways and Means Chairman does not address the issue. The fact is that the cap on SALT expires at the end of this year, and it would come back unlimited. The reason that we are willing to negotiate in good faith, of course, is because with it would come the alternative minimum tax. The standard deduction would be cut in half.
So what's your red line on SALT, Congressman? What's your red line on SALT? What's your number?
So I'm not going to negotiate the number with you. We are in the process of working with leadership and the administration on this. Today was the first day in which they actually had a numbers discussion with us, which was absurd. We've been asking for these conversations to occur for months. And this all could have been avoided. We could have had these issues resolved, frankly, months ago. But they chose to wait till today to put this number out, the $30,000 with a $400,000 income cap. But the fact is, you look at a district like mine, where 3 of the 4 counties I represent have the highest property tax burden in the country. They're in the top 16 in the country. Just having an income cap does not address the fact that you have massively high property taxes in states like New York. By the way, Texas has high property taxes.
Yeah, it's all
there are a lot of issues still to be dealt with here, including the fact of the marriage penalty, among other issues to deal with.
I want to be clear. I'm not trying to negotiate with you here. I'm just trying to get a sense of where you and your colleagues are.
I'm not gonna get into the numbers.
Understood. Let me leave you with this, because you are a member of Congress who's talked about a lot more than your colleagues because of the district you're in, because of the pressure that's put on you, and because of your own political future. And there's a question about whether or not you might run for governor in your home state of New York. Have you ruled that out at this point?
No, I'm still going through that process. As I've said repeatedly, we'll make a decision sometime in June.
Okay.
And so we'll keep you posted.
Hope you come on back. Mike Lawler is the Republican from New York. Nice to see you as always, sir. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
You got it. All right, joining me now here on the Hill, Mark Short, former White House Director of Legislative Affairs during the first Trump administration, and Chris Cillizza, NewsNation contributor. Hello to you both. Hey. Nice to have you in.
Good to be here.
Thank you. I thought it was a pretty consequential day. Obviously, you love to see the 21-year-old last hostage come out. Him hugging his mother is an incredible scene. The day started with the China tariff news, right? And then what I just went through with the Congressman, Mark, dropped, like an hour or so ago, and now we're starting to see some of the fallout. You were the line in the first term between the White House and Congress. Decode for me what you just heard there from Congressman Lawler.
Well, I think we have to keep in mind that politically this is a good fight for Lawler. He's still wanting to run for governor. And so from a politics perspective, it's good for him to fight this. I think it's terrible policy for any conservative Republican. I think our position when we lowered the cap to $10,000 in the first bill in 2017 is we feel we should not be subsidizing poorly run states. And states that have high tax burdens should not be given extra deductions that other taxpayers across the country pay for. Of the 50 top districts that are impacted by SALT, 46 are represented by Democrats. So for Mike Lawler, it's a good political fight because he's running for governor in a blue state. But I think for Republicans in general and conservatives, this is a terrible policy issue. And the notion that we're going to triple it to $30,000.
They want higher. Michael Snell's talking about 2x of what they are now.
I know. And it's the reality of having such a narrow majority in the House is that people can hold the bill hostage. And that's what's happening.
So if you zoom out today, Chris, look, a lot of things have gone well for the president recently, but this is also the battle that he has before him as well.
And I'm a total First of all, everything Mark said is exactly right. I couldn't agree more with.
Let's save that.
Yeah, I know. I don't always say that.
That's why the man had the job that he did.
When Mark is right, he is right. I'm a broken record on this, but I really do think, and Mark may agree or disagree, but I just still don't understand why they did tariffs first and now trade. Excuse me, tariffs first and now taxes. It's just with such a small majority, you need all the goodwill you can get because the SALT fight is always going to be there. There's always going to be some deficit hawks like, why are we not paying for every single thing that's in there? To me, you need Trump at his sort of the acme of his sort of political power and intimidation potential. While he's sort of starting, to your point, trending back there, he's not there. So it's like it was always going to be hard. When you have a 3-seat majority, Mark can speak to this. You have a 3-seat majority, it's hard to do anything. And you got 2 people who are sick. You don't have a majority barely anymore. So the sequencing is weird. I still think they will ultimately get it done because they have to do something big. And I think this is probably the only big thing they do this entire Congress.
They're wrapping me, but I want our audience.
Oh, sorry.
But I want our audience to hear what you have to say here. Because you can sort of get into his head a little bit. When Donald Trump sort of sees what's going on here, what do you think he's thinking?
Well, I think he's answering Chris's question in part. I think he's retreating on the trade war for exactly that reason. Like, I need to get this issue off the table right now.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
All right. See you both later in the show. Appreciate it. Mark, Chris, thank you. Still to come tonight here on The Hill. Pope Leo XIV talks to the press and he talks to NewsNation. What our Robert Sherman asked the Pope today and how Leo XIV responded. Robert joins us live. Plus, how about this question? Is Uncle Sam going to go after the leader of the Catholic Church? I'll explain why some are now asking that very question. Also, airports, delays, cancellations. Woof, the nightmares at Newark continue. The Transportation Secretary talking today, and we are speaking with the former head of the FAA. Welcome to Washington on what has been a busy day. This is the Center of Politics. I'm Blake Berman, The Hill. Back in 4 minutes. Wasting no time letting the world know his vision for the Catholic Church in his first meeting with Cardinals over the weekend. He said he would uphold Pope Francis's, quote, precious legacy. The new Pope, who's a lifelong fan of the Chicago White Sox, also had time to sign his official autograph. Would you look at that? On this baseball today, he asked Jason Parash, a 46-year-old attorney from Colorado, quote, White Sox or Cubs? He replied, Sox. And there is the signature. Our Robert Sherman, live for us tonight, once again in Vatican City, who had his own, my gosh, Robert, unique, memorable experience today. You asked a question of the Pope, you shook his hand, he looked you in the eye, and he responded to you. What was that like?
Yeah, Blake, I mean, I'm still trying to come to peace with it a little bit and process all of it. I would say that it really hasn't hit me yet. I mean, not for the fact that we do have the clip that exists there, I wouldn't even believe it myself. But here's that exchange for yourself. Take a look.
Holy Father, any message for the United States?
It's just so hard for me to process that, Blake, because throughout the last couple of weeks here, as we've been covering the conclave, just about everyone here in Europe has been saying no way that there's going to be an American pope who assumes the papacy. Sure enough, an American pope comes from the heartland of the United States, and you listen to the way that he talks, similar fashion to people who you and I have probably grown up with as well. And that was the first and only pope whose hand that I've ever shaken, and I still can't even believe it to this moment.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. I woke up, I saw your email, I said, my goodness, good on you, Robert Sherman, and what a moment there. Robert, thanks so much. Appreciate it. So one of the other big stories and questions here is, believe it or not, might the Pope have to pay taxes? File with Uncle Sam. After all, he's an American citizen. And yes, that possibility is now being discussed. Joining us now here on the Hill is Caroline Bruckner. She's a tax professor at American University's Kogod School of Business, live with us tonight here on the Hill. Nice to see you. Hello. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
I read this weekend, and I had to read it 3 or 4 times, Caroline, because I said, what? Uncle Sam might want some paperwork from the Pope. Explain.
Well, so the U.S. is unique among developed countries in that it taxes U.S. citizens on their worldwide income.
Okay.
So if you're a U.S. citizen and you live outside the U.S. for a full year, you generally may be subject to a tax return filing like everyone else.
Yeah.
But there are exceptions for generally for people that earn less for below a certain amount. And that gets adjusted for inflation every year. And so for this year, it's going to be $130,000. So given that he's likely to follow in his predecessor's footsteps and not take a formal salary, there's a good chance that Pope Leo will be below that $130,000 cap.
Can you tee up the soundbite, please, from the acting IRS commissioner? Because he was on NewsNation earlier today, and Connell McShane asked him this question. If we have it, let's roll it, please, real quick.
It's based upon where the income is generated. So I believe, I don't know enough about Pope Leo, but I believe he is going to generate that income in the United States. I don't know enough about his citizenship to know whether or not there would be a tax on him.
That seemed like we're not sure what we might do here. In fairness, I don't know that he's thought about this. But.
So it could be that Pope Leo generates speaking fees that he donates back to the church. But even if you generate those fees and choose to donate them, it may still trigger a tax filing obligation. And one would think that the Pope charges a pretty hefty fee for speaking engagements.
I mean, yeah, who knows?
But there's also bigger questions that are at play here, given that he is going to be the head of the Vatican Bank.
Right.
And there are...
And so real quick, that was sort of set up from an agreement with Pope Francis.
Right. In 2015, Pope Francis, in trying to pursue an agenda of transparency and reporting, signed an agreement with the United States that would require and subject those accounts to U.S. banking and reporting requirements. But those requirements never were expected to come into play because who saw an American
saw this
Pope?
coming? You're going to teach this in class?
Absolutely. It's something that we're going to cover.
I'm telling you, I saw the headlines and I was like, but then I guess it kind of makes sense. Caroline Bruckner, thanks so much. Thanks for being with us tonight here on the Hill. All right. Kind of wild, right? I guess they're going to work through it. We'll see. Live look right now. Newark Airport in New Jersey. It suffered 3 outages in 2 weeks. Can it get fixed? What the Transportation Secretary said today, the former head of the FAA, live on the other side of the break. And it's the hottest dinner in town for some. I'm going to explain to you what is happening with the president and a select few later on the Hill.
The equipment that we use is so old, the information has to be slowed down. It comes in too fast. It has to go at the speed of copper wires. We're using equipment that looks like it's off the Apollo 13 set.
That, of course, the Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy speaking earlier today, addressing the ongoing outages at Newark Liberty International Airport. The Secretary says the core issue is the telecommunications lines. Now, air traffic control is using copper wires, outdated technology to communicate with inbound and outbound flights. During that press conference, the secretary also continued to blame the Biden administration for the tech issues.
I think it is clear that the blame belongs with the last administration. Pete Buttigieg and Joe Biden did nothing to fix the system that they knew was broken.
Now, as the Trump administration seeks to overhaul air traffic control, there is more turbulence at airports. Newark experiencing ground delays until 9 p.m. after experiencing its third air traffic control system outage in less than 2 weeks on Sunday. Joining me now is Billy Nolan. He's the former acting director at the FAA, with us once again live here on the Hill. Always nice to see you.
Pleasure. Good to be here.
You were the FAA administrator for 14 months.
Yes.
Basically the time frame that Sean Duffy was talking about. So when you hear him, what is the rebuttal, I guess, that you would make, and how fair is that criticism as you see it?
Look, I acknowledge I'm a strong supporter of Secretary Duffy.
Okay.
I think there's something to be said. We're at this phase where actions matter. The bottom line up front is that our airspace system is basically safe, but it's fragile. And we're starting to see those cracks sort of pile up, right? So the time is now for some real action on the part of...
What do you mean fragile? There's going to be a lot of nervous flyers who are going to say, Billy, hold on, what did you just say?
What I say is, first and foremost, it is safe. Okay. How do we keep it safe? By throttling back. You know, there's something the Secretary spoke to. You reduce the number of airplanes in the system. You put ground control stops in place, right? So those are the kind of programs that the FAA has to maintain the safety and integrity of the system. But let's go back. Because we've underinvested in our nation's, infrastructure around air transportation for decades, and something the Secretary has talked a lot about over the past week, it is time. And this is a moment, if you talk to airline CEOs, you talk to folks who do this every day, right. They will tell you, we have an opportunity, almost a once-in-a-generation opportunity to really give America the kind of airspace system and air traffic control system that it deserves.
So how long does it take to get there? Because we just played the comments from the Transportation Secretary. I was listening to him today. He was basically just saying, look, the tech is terrible. And we had a soundbite from a Democratic congressman the other day who called it from the Brady Bunch era, right? So going forward, Billy, as you've seen under the hood, you know how all this works. Yeah. How long is it going to take to fix this from top to bottom?
I think you can start. There are things you can do right away, right? You can do things that are procedural. It'll take us some time. There are initiatives in place to get more controllers. The first thing, right, the more controllers, the more bodies we put in radar, in TRACONs and air traffic control towers, right? That's an immediate help and reduce some of the congestion.
So show that graphic if we can, because this has been the number of ATC air traffic controller staff over the last decade or so. And you see there, straight in one direction.
Right.
Which is down.
So we've heard the Secretary talk about, let's put money on the table, bonuses, extend the age. Controllers have to mandatory retirement at 56. There is some ability to stay to 61. So those are that might need congressional approval, but he is looking into that. You just got to start thinking about this technology, right? Okay. When I was the administrator, I had about a $24 billion budget. About $19 billion of that was for operation, about $5 billion for infrastructure improvements, but only about 3.5 of that went to directly for air traffic control improvements.
So here's what Sean Duffy says on that front, and we'll pick it up for there.
We didn't have to be here. This did not have to be our story. over the last 4 years, the last administration, they knew this was a problem. They got $1.2 trillion for infrastructure, and virtually none of it went to fix the biggest American infrastructure problem that we have.
If I hear you right, you're basically saying the money was a lot smaller than actually.
And the money has been a lot smaller over the course of decades, right? This is what Congress, what both the appropriators are giving the FAA. Now, part of that comes from the president budget. So, you know what? I say good on. This is the time to be courageous. So I applaud the work that Secretary Duff is doing. Says, we're going to get this done. We're not going to pass this on. And that's the right thing to say. So it's time. You've got never in my career, and I've been a pilot for more than 44 years, right? Never in my career have I seen this level of support to come together and say, let's build the very best the American people expected. But more than that, they deserve it.
When do you think Newark gets fixed?
I think Newark, the first thing you can do is to throttle it back. One of the things, there's a meeting starting on Wednesday and Thursday this week that the Secretary has called, along with the Acting Administrator, Chris Rocheleau, and they're going to look specifically at Newark as to what do we do. You can do one thing. You can take it back to a Category 3. That's one option on the table, which makes the slots hard versus voluntary. So I think they're going to look at, what are our options, a suite of options to go and fix Newark. That won't be an easy one. It may mean
months,
fewer flights. No, there are things you could do very quickly.
No, but I mean to get it, when we talk about the tech to
get the tech, yes, that's going to be months. But look, we've got some really good minds out there. You got Elon, you got Bezos, you got Palantir. All these folks are really good. Let's bring the best and brightest and build America a really good air traffic control system.
Any other airports that we should be keeping our eyes on? You've seen the landscape. Obviously, Newark is right before us right now.
Newark is right before us across the nation. I mean, you can picture big airports that have delays. Atlanta gets its delays. The South in the summertime.
There's delays in Atlanta? I've never heard that story before.
But all in all, look, this is the time to take an overall very much of a strategic approach and say, let's go do this.
Billy Nolan, former head of the FAA. Always nice to see you.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks for being with us. I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Billy.
Thank you.
All right. Still to come here on the Hill, a reunion, mother-son family. More than 580 days in the making.
Yo, yeah!
The last living American hostage held by Hamas reuniting hours ago. The emotional moment as the president takes off for the Middle East. Full panel joins me next here on the Hill.
On Balance tonight, tracking President Trump's Middle East visit. Bill O'Reilly breaks down the high-stakes trip with Leland Vittert, tackling the biggest issues and political fallout with no spin, just the truth. Tonight at 9, 8 Central on NewsNation.
How about that moment right there? Aiden Alexander, the last remaining American hostage in Gaza, celebrating his freedom tonight, reunited with his family. That, of course, his mother, his father, along his side. He was released by Hamas after more than 580 days in captivity, just 21 years old. He was handed over to the Red Cross and eventually arrived on an Israeli military base for medical treatment. Hamas announced the release last night after several days of negotiations with the United States, a part of the effort to reach a ceasefire and resume humanitarian aid to Gaza. It comes as President Trump is now aboard Air Force One on his way to the Middle East. And he made the announcement earlier today.
They thought he was dead just a short while ago. His parents are so happy. They're so happy. So it's, as you know, Eden's the only American citizen who's captured and held hostage by Hamas since October 7th, 2023, and he's coming home to his parents.
Obviously a great day for Aiden and his family, but could you also say it's been a good day on several fronts for the Trump White House as well? Stock markets now at its highest point since April 2nd, quote-unquote, Liberation Day. The Chinese basically saying today, okay, let's negotiate on tariffs, both sides lowering their tariffs. Also earlier today, a lifelong Democrat, the HHS Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., or at least a Democrat at one point, had this to say about President Trump's latest executive order, which is aimed at knocking down prescription drug prices.
I have a couple of kids who are Democrats, are big Bernie Sanders fans, and when I told them that this was going to happen, they had tears in their eyes.
Potentially the president as well, coming back from his Middle East trip here in the upcoming days with some sort of announcement or investments. That's normally how it works when you go over and come back on the first big trip. So what about it from here on out? Full panel here with me now. Dan Cannon, former Battleground States Director for the Biden and Harris campaigns. Mark Short back with us, former Chief of Staff to Vice President Mike Pence. Jessica Anderson, former budget official in the first Trump White House. And Chris Cillizza, NewsNation contributor. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in.
Good to be here.
I thought this was one of the more consequential days of Trump 2.0.
Yes, agreed. It was a big day for President Trump. We're 40 days after Liberation Day when the tariffs were first announced. I think then when we were on this show, we were all really concerned. Were the American people going to pull out their 401ks? Were they going to leave the market? Many of them did. Today was a big rally, and we've talked about this a lot. While the market isn't the only indicator of success for the American people, I think what the stock market has done today, reflecting to the good news over the weekend of the deals coming together between China, which this whole thing was about China, is a good indicator that the president is following through on all of his commitments for the economy, coupled with the tax bill, coupled with seeing all of the results from the deregulatory agenda. It's a good day.
But?
Well, look, it's a good day because he stopped the trade war that he initiated. I think at the same time, when you're announcing price controls, bracing price controls, and basically allowing socialist economies in Europe to determine what we're going to be paying for drugs, I don't think that's conservative policy.
So this is the most favored nation policy that you're referring to, that was the president's executive order, which he signed today, which basically said, look, if whatever country pays for a certain drug, we're not paying X plus, we're paying X, whatever that number is. And your side of the aisle, a lifelong Republican, you call that price controls.
It's absolutely price controls. It's basically socialized. It's socialized economics. I mean, I think
so. Why'd he do it?
Between the trade policy, looking to promote higher taxes on highest earners in America, price controls, you're getting closer and closer to basically having two parties with left-wing ideology when it comes to economics.
You just heard RFK Jr. talk about Bernie Sanders.
Of course, he's a lifelong Democrat. If you're still questioning, he is a Democrat, and those are the people who have tears in their eyes. I do too, for other reasons, though.
I do think Mark hits on an important thing, which is this party right now, if you went back in the time machine to 2012 when Mitt Romney was the Republican nominee for president and Paul Ryan was the Republican vice presidential nominee, it's been largely unrecognizable. There's the conservative justices, lower taxes, et cetera, but the views that Donald Trump has, like the populist piece of all of this, which is why I think he did the price controls thing, because look, it's like, do you pay too much for your prescription drugs? Sure. So everyone agrees with that, but it doesn't look like the Republican. I mean, it is a remarkable transformation over not that long a period of time.
Monthly shots of Ozempic, what it costs in Germany, Denmark, France, Germany, you're talking at $100 or so, or under. Canada, $155. The U.S., it's $1,000 a month, and that's what he's trying to get at, I guess, Dan.
I guess, but this is also just an executive order. It's a press release, essentially. There's no teeth to this. He's saying, I want my department to investigate these things, to look into this stuff, to ask countries to voluntarily participate, or the drug companies to do that. There's no teeth to this. It's a press release. And on the trade pieces, yes, Mark's right. The market, is celebrating that he walked away from the ledge. But we're still on the top of the building. There's still a 10% across-the-board tariff, still 20% in other places, including China, still 120% on Chinese products below $800. So all the cheap stuff is still going to absolutely be more expensive. And it's just a pause. It's a ceasefire in this war on the economy. It's the biggest tax increase in American history.
But as I laid out at the top of the show, market's higher since Liberation Day. Oil prices dropping. Labor market is resilient. 177,000 jobs added last month. Unemployment not moving down, staying the same. I heard Jay Powell describe the economy as in quote-unquote solid shape, and that was before the announcement on tariffs. So can't you sit back here, Dan, and say, okay, maybe some of this is working?
When he took office,
I'm not saying it is. I'm just asking the question.
60 million new jobs created under Joe Biden. Inflation gone from 9% down to 2.4%.
It was roller coaster.
Which is where we are today, 2.4%. And the jobs rate was also low. That's what he inherited, a strong fundamental economy. I agree with Jay Powell. But the impact of tariffs has not hit yet. There's that port of Los Angeles where they're waiting for this stuff to come into the port. It's going to be late because stuff's already delayed. There's going to be supply chain issues. If they can find a way out of this, maybe some of the worst damage will get mitigated, but there's still a 10% across-the-board sales tax that's coming that hasn't really hit consumers yet.
I leave the policy to smarter folks on this panel. But what I will say is, from a political perspective, I still don't understand the tariff thing at all. You're right. It's now back to where we were 40 days ago. Okay, above. Yep. But it's not to where we were on January 20th. Right. I know he believes it. And I know he doesn't believe all that many things, but I know he believes it. It's just, it was always obvious, politically speaking, that injecting uncertainty was not going to work. Now, maybe a year from now, we're still pretty far from an election. Maybe a year from now, people have forgotten this. The economy's booming, it doesn't matter. But it's an amazing risk to take. I don't know really what the UK deal is. It that advantageous to us? Is what we get in China that advantageous to us that it was worth it? We don't know.
Out the China yet, other than the China portion of it, other than just the tariff levels are dropping.
The best way to understand the Trump economic goal here is the whole package.
I think Mark wants to know too.
It's tariffs, it's tax cuts being permanently extending, it's the savings from the deregulatory agenda, and it's reshaping how the American people value success. Is it just the market, or is it more? Is it your family? Is it your schools? Is it parental choice? There's other things that he cares about. So when you talk about the policy that shifts, absolutely, the policy for the Republican Party is day and night what it was in many places from a decade ago. But politically, it's bringing in a whole new crop of voters that this president thinks that he needs to win.
It's day and night from the first administration, Jessica, and not just from a decade ago. In the first administration, you were instrumental in helping to cut regulations. The deregulatory low-tax agenda was incredibly successful.
But he hasn't
Trump.
left that behind.
He has. He's proposed higher taxes on part of his tax bill.
He's pushing it to Congress.
He's proposing price controls as far as what you buy your medicine. He's proposing.
It's remarkable. Just to remind people, he is a Republican president.
It is dramatically different than the first administration policies, and he has basically a play script for how to get it going again. Is what to do in the first administration.
I just want to remind everybody that he got into office because people thought prices were out of control, things cost too much, including healthcare, including drugs, including goods, and every single thing that he has done is going to increase those costs on Americans, including a $700 billion cut. And kicking 14 million people off of Medicare.
Are you there with Dan on that?
Look, not yet. I mean, I'm somebody who thinks that actually the tariffs on China, you have an adversary we should be uniting the world against China, as we did in the first administration. The across-the-board tariffs on all of our friends and allies alike, 10%, will create it is a tax increase. That's what it is.
I think we should also just note that part of the tariff that's remaining in China is on fentanyl. And it's 20% on fentanyl. And so there are details here that I think do matter. And he did campaign on going against China's direct pushing fentanyl through Mexico to the United States. And that tariff has remained.
It's just look, people make giant bets and it works out. Right? It's just, I just think you have to understand. I take Jessica's point that you have to look at sort of a holistic. It's not just the tariffs, not just the tax cut. It's a gigantic bet to inject a huge amount of uncertainty and chaos into both trade and the broader economy and be like, it's going to be fine and we're going to redefine what success means. Because you know what success means to most people is like, be able to pay your bills and buy a thing or two that you want.
Well, as these two heard before many, many times over, we'll see what happens.
See what happens.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks for being in. Good stuff. All right, still to come. The president says he's the most transparent president in history. So what's happening next weekend? I'll explain. Coming up on Elizabeth Vargas Reports, she'll speak live to the mayor of Tenafly, New Jersey, the hometown of Eden Alexander, who was just released from Hamas captivity. That's coming up 7 o'clock here on NewsNation. My take, other side of the break. All right, now on this spring evening, it is beautiful weather. I mean, beautiful weather here in Washington. If Doge's mission is to trim the waste on Capitol Hill, there's another initiative, by the way, just down the block that's also meant to trim the waste, W-A-I-S-T, I guess. For another week or so, scores of Capitol Hill staffers from both the House and Senate will be competing in the Red Fitness Watch Challenge. It's an annual fitness competition pitting congressional offices against each other to see who can rack up the most points using their designated smartwatches to measure their levels of activity. An excuse to get outside, I guess. I don't know. The weather, though, is beautiful. Trust me. All right. Speaking of the next couple of weeks, time for my take now. You're going to start to hear potentially about an exclusive dinner hosted by President Trump at his nearby golf course. That's on May 22nd. Now, the guest list will comprise of the top investors in Trump's meme coin. That's the cryptocurrency he launched just days before his recent inauguration. By the way, the top 25 holders of that meme coin will also get a private tour of the People's House. That's the White House. So a simple question tonight. If those investors are getting this kind of access, do we have a right to know who they are? Should the White House disclose that? If you think the answer is no, I want to take you back to the Obama administration. Conservatives and critics fumed about the numbers of off-site meetings and how President Obama, who vowed transparency before getting into the White House, was handling, and how he was handling the White House visitor logs. For example, in 2009, the Obama White House compromised and divulged White House guests for public record. There were still, though, questions about just how transparent they were being, and in 2011, there were congressional hearings on the matter. Now, we don't know what, if anything, will come of this dinner and tour. We are clearly in new territory here with the rise of crypto, now a powerful $3 trillion industry. And as I have said on this show repeatedly, an industry I believe helped the president win the popular vote. But I ask tonight, if you were for disclosure then, how can you be against it now? And that's my take. I leave you tonight with a live look over at the White House. The president is on the road. He is headed to the Middle East. It is going to be a consequential few days over there. The president's first major foreign trip, I guess, of his second term.